I'm Suzy Shaw, mom of two, now adult boys, and author of the book Mother of Boys Survival Guide. This podcast shares practical insights, expert advice, and real conversations to help moms raise confident, capable boys. You can find more episodes and resources at mothersofboys.life. Now, let's get into today's conversation. How to raise boys with purpose who grow into good men. There are moments in parenting when you stop and think, am I just getting through the day, or am I doing what I can to raise a good human? What kind of man will my son grow into? Today's conversation is about shifting from reactive parenting to more intentional parenting without adding pressure or perfection to an already full plate. My guest today, Nathaniel Turner, calls himself a humanity propulsion engineer. He believes we shouldn't leave our children's futures to chance, that we can be far more intentional in how we guide them. During my pre-interview conversations with Nate, I was intrigued by his story and the intentional choices he and his wife made while raising their son. In his book, Raising Supaman, Nate refers to his son as an MIT, a man in training. Nate's commitment to guiding and shaping his son is inspiring. And I think many of you, the mob, the mothers of boys, will appreciate the actionable ways moms can help create space for fathers to show up more intentionally and build stronger connections with their sons. Welcome, Nate.
Hey, thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Well, me too. And I first want to say thank you for sending me your books. You have a wide variety of books, from children's books to your Raising Supaman to fixing the school system.
My diatribe. Yes.
Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your wife and your family?
Sure. I am the son of Tommy L. and Gladys T. Turner, and I'm the brother of Kimberly and the husband of Latanya, and the father, most notably, most importantly to me, of Naeem. And and I'm a product of Gary, Indiana, and I kind of describe who I am by probably the way people remember me when I'm no more.
So how did you come up with the term humanity propulsion engineer? And can you explain your sort of building blocks of, for the foundation for your son?
Sure. So, it, full disclosure, I'm not an engineer. Uh, Naeem, my son, is an engineer. And when I first suggested to him that I was going to call myself a humanity propulsion engineer, he reminded me that
As only a son can.
that I have no engineering training. But when I explained to him my thinking, he said, I'll allow it. So it's really simple. It's just like the words. We'll take them apart. Humanity. Everyone understands humanity, human beings, hopefully our compassion or empathy thereof. Propulsion meaning to move forward or go upward, which I would say in a positive fashion. And then engineering are tools, techniques, and strategies to, if you engineer something, engineering electricity, or from engineering applied sciences, we are trying to create something. And so
Mhm.
what I think of as a humanity propulsion engineer is that's something we all are. We all come to the planet, hopefully, to want to treat our fellow humans with empathy and compassion, with grace and mercy. We should all come to the planet hoping that we can leave the planet better when we depart than it was when we arrived. And I think we can do that when we are equipped with tools, techniques, and strategies to do that very thing.
Right. Amen.
So
Um,
that's that. And I think you asked me a second question. You said, "What do we do for our
well,
son?" Go ahead. I'm sorry.
mm, right. So some of the building blocks, and I'll follow it up that, you and your wife seemed to have a concrete approach or a
Hmm.
unified approach in raising your son, and the outcomes are impressive. So, what were some of the intentional choices you made early in his life?
Well, I think the first thing that Latanya and I both did is that we recognized, as the old quote goes, the trees and fruit. We both recognized that we were going to be a tree and we were going to be creating some fruit. And the first thing that she and I needed to do was assess who we were as trees. And that meant taking a look at how we were developed, how we were cultivated, and recognizing that there were some errors in the way that we were cultivated, and in order to not to do the same thing to an unborn child or to a child moving forward, were to make sure that we address those things. So that for me is the most important thing, and I'm still striving to do it each day, is to find a way to be better today than I was yesterday. That's the very first thing. When we realize, which we have what are called ACEs, which are adverse childhood experiences, that the CDC says that there are 10 that are most notable. When we realized that I had 8 of those 10 and she had 7 of those 10, and combined we had 9 of those 10, we knew that we needed a roadmap, if you will, a template. And what we did was, just coincidentally, I was graduating from law school and I was unemployed. And one of the things I was most concerned with was being like my father, one of those things I did not want to happen, but I was unemployed like my father was a great deal of the time during my childhood. And I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna be just like my father. Like, I don't wanna be like him. So what could I have done differently that I wouldn't have been unemployed? And I realized, well, maybe if I go into a different law school. And well, what law school could you have gone to, Nate, that you probably would be gainfully employed? Well, Harvard. And well, why aren't you at Harvard? Until you start to backtrack and ask yourself these questions, and then you get back and realize that at the very beginning, nobody had a plan for your life so that you could attend Harvard. So we wrote Harvard instead for an application for an unborn child. And we used Harvard's application, which asked for three primary things. Students, in 1994, students, of course, to do well academically. But the second and third items surprised us. The second one was they were looking for world citizens. And the third item is they were looking for people who cared for something greater than themselves. And we thought, well, wow, that's a very unique thing. Never looked at an academic admissions application that way. Um, and so we use those three elements to then create what we now call the life template, which is intellectual ambition, which is to be, of course, to make good grades and have great test scores, but more importantly, to understand how to think critically. Secondly, what was, instead of just saying world citizen, now we call it global and cultural competency, because the world is big, but it's also very small. And then lastly, to be humanitarian driven. So those are the three elements we use for every aspect of his life.
The humanitarian and the global citizen one, did that require, volunteering? I mean, how did you do that?
In full disclosure, in the beginning, we didn't like everything we did was a little bit like he was a guinea pig, and
Mhm.
we were testing it, trying to figure out
Well, I
what
will say that's for all of us.
right.
That's not just for you. I mean, especially if you have 2 kids,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
understand the second one was your
right,
first one was your guinea pig.
right.
So,
Well, we were reading a lot of things, and we pretty much understood the intellectual piece. Although we came across an educational tool called backward design and realized, hey, this might be a really useful way to do this, because backward design has three elements also. And if you think of three circles and you have one larger outside circle, it would say familiarity. And we thought, okay, so what we should do is make sure the child is familiar with as many things as we could possibly make the child familiar with. Because we realized that folks typically like children who knew a lot of stuff. They called them precocious. And so, like, okay, that's a good thing. And then inside that big circle was a slightly smaller circle, and that circle was called mastery. And we realized that there's certain things the child had to master: reading, writing, math, and science, certainly, but also civility, right? Respect for oneself, etc. So we put that as a second element. And then the third, inside the very smaller circle, was the core. And we wanted to make sure that whoever that child was, that that child would be known by everyone that they met as that very person at the core of their being. So that was our approach. And again, there was some I don't know if there was so much as much failure, but there was some iterating, not much pivoting, but iterating from where where we started because we thought uh, being a global citizen was the answer. Well, they said world citizen, but we realized it was more than just language. So first it was for us was like, can we just teach a child to speak another language? And then we realized, well, that may not be enough. So
Hmm.
yeah, we just kept iterating.
So when we first talked, you described to me the motivation really behind your book,
Yes.
which is Raising Supaman.
Mhm.
Pronounce it for me.
You're fine. Soup. So think of
Soup.
soup like a bowl of
Like
soup.
it's Superman without the R,
Without the R because I
right?
don't want to get sued. Yes.
So I just found it very, very inspiring. So can you explain to me
Sure.
and it became an inspiration for your son to learn how to read
Yeah.
and where these, the foundation of this book?
Sure. So first, I was just writing notes when I learned I was gonna be a father. Started writing notes about what it was I would hope for a child, and honestly, those notes were a lot less about the child and a lot about me, the things I wanted the child to achieve. I never shared the notes with my son, but then one day, as a 2-year-old, we walk into the mailbox, and he says, "Hey, Daddy, where's my mail?" And
Mhm.
I said, "Hey, man, there's nothing. You don't have any mail." But he said, "But Daddy, but I want mail." And I said, "But I have nothing but bills and junk mail. You don't want any of this." And he said, "But Daddy, I
Yeah,
want mail."
as
So,
only a 2-year-old can.
absolutely. So I said, "Okay, okay, okay. I gotta write you." So I went to Target and I bought some greeting cards and postcards. And those are the days when people actually still went to the office. And so I would go to the office and I would write on these greeting cards and postcards. And what I found, Susie, that in writing on these greeting cards and postcards, that I just didn't have enough space. Because the things from my own childhood as I was writing my son were coming out of me. Things I thought I was over. And I might have been over, but I wasn't healed from. And I'm now writing these postcards to this child, and it's not even legible because I'm trying to say so much. And when I would get home, he would say, "Daddy, I got mail today." And then eventually, of course, Daddy, read my mail. And I say, "Hey, man, look, I'm not gonna keep writing you and reading to you." And he said, "Well, Daddy, teach me to read." And so
Right.
that was the inspiration to then start to teach him to read.
And so fast forward, you continue this practice
Mhm.
of writing him letters, throughout his life, and now he is
30.
a young man. Well, no,
Oh,
no,
yes. I'm
and
sorry.
right? So he's a young man, and he goes away,
Yes.
as part of a sports, you
Yes.
know, thing. Can you explain that?
Yeah, let's say not go that didn't go away as in going away to prison. Yes,
Right.
yeah, no.
Sports.
He went to Brazil. He's the end of his starting his second semester of his just before his second semester of his junior year of high school. We were in Vegas, and we don't gamble, and so we were like, "What are we gonna do?" He'd seen all the shows he wanted to see, and we decided to drive out to the Grand Canyon, and he and I are running along the edge of the Grand Canyon, and Latanya's behind us, yelling and screaming at us to get away from the edge, and Naim and I just finished reading The Alchemist, and I'd read Timothy Ferriss's book, The 4 Hour Work Week, and he says to me, "Hey," I said, "how do you feel now?" He said, "It's just great." I said, "Yeah, because everything good in life happens on the edge." He says, "Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you, Daddy. And that's why after I finish this semester, my second semester, I'm not going back to high school. You need to get me out of here." And I said, "Huh? You're not doing what?" "I'm not going back to high school. This is a waste of time. I have a dream. You taught me about dreaming, and I need to go chase my dream." I like, "Oh, okay." So his dream was to lead the country and play soccer abroad. So that meant his father, because his father had to figure out how to get him out of here. So I did. I found a virtual assistant. His name is Nathan. And Nathan found us 11 clubs across the globe that offered him opportunities to come in for tryouts. And we decided his favorite clubs were in Brazil. So he flew to Brazil and he decided, "I'm good. I'm going to stay in Brazil." I had written him about, I don't know, probably, Susie, probably hundreds of letters. But the truth is,
Mhm.
when you write a small child letters, you don't know where the letters are going to end up. So we didn't have all the letters. So the ones that I could find, I scrounged them up and I put them in a binder. and I gave them to him when I was there. And Latanya told me to stay in Brazil for a few days. I had taken him to Brazil in late July, and was going to leave him. And she says, "No, you got to stay in the country for a while. We don't know how this is
Hmm.
going to go." So
Right.
I go off to Rio by myself for a few days because I say every man should go to Rio on his own, and it's not really true, but it sounds good. And she calls me and she says he's not doing well. He's in a country in a city called Porto Feliz, and I have to go back. So I catch a flight back. Um, where did Sao Paulo, and then I take a cab ride to the camp. It's $415. So I just wanted people to know how much I loved him. I catch this cab, it cost me $415. The guy speaks Portuguese, no English. I speak English, no Portuguese.
Yeah.
It's it's
A little
the start
stressful.
it's starting to get dark. I'm getting nervous. He doesn't know where he's
Hmm.
going. He's asking me questions. I have no idea. Anyway, we finally get there, and he says, I said, "Are you okay?" He said, "Yeah, I'm fine. I got a question for you." And I said, "I got a question for you too. Why did I spend $415 to be back here if you're okay?" He says, "Well, Dad, my question is, did you put the letters in any particular order?" And I said, "No." He said, "I reread them. I read the first three letters that in here, and I remember my purpose, and I'm gonna be fine. But when I come home, Daddy, we're gonna publish these letters." And I said, "But why? They're not anybody else's. They're yours." And he said, "Yeah, but I think other people need to know what I know." And I said, "What's that?" "When you tell me I can do something, not only do I know I can do it, I know it's gonna happen." So, 18 months or so when he returned, he had a concussion, pretty severe, decided he was done with that journey, that portion of his life. He did all the work to get that book published.
So the book is set up really interestingly. It's very fascinating, um, inspiring chapter names, and then there is a letter from you to your son, and then at the end there are some questions which I also think are very interesting. And some of the chapters are, the first one is "As a Man Thinketh," and here's another one. Um, it's it's not where you start, but where you finish. And one of the ones I really enjoyed was "One word that can destroy everything you hope to achieve." And you had him in the beginning of this book, um, which I recognize was not a fun experience for you, but you had to memorize this quote, and so you asked him to memorize this quote, and the quote is, "Excuses are
Are
the tools
tools
of
of
the incompetent,
incompetent
used to build monuments
monuments to
of
nothingness."
nothingness. Those who use excuses are seldom good for anything else." Um, so just tell us a little bit about what you hope that readers of your book will, walk away with, and, how you structured it.
Yeah, so again, in full disclosure, a child told me to publish the book. So the unique relationship that we had, or that we have, is that I'd asked Naeem as a 11-year-old, he asked me for an iPhone, and I asked him to write me a business proposal. And he said, "But Daddy, but you're the lawyer." I said, "Yeah, but I don't want the phone. You do." And so it is those kind of experiences that when now this young man is 18, he knows exactly what to do. Forms the contract to find the person to illustrate the book cover. He's the person who finds the person to edit the book. It is he and the editor who decide that there should be questions at the end of each chapter. I wish I could take credit for that. I can't. I can only take credit for having written the letters. What did I hope to happen with the letters? I just hoped initially that the letters would serve as a reference point for him when I messed it up, because I was certain that I was going to be like my father and his father before him. I was certain that there was going to be a day that my son was going to talk about me in the same way that I talked about my father as somebody who failed him. And I just wanted him to have some evidence that I actually did care, that I actually tried, that I actually loved him, because I don't have any of that with my father. And my father didn't have it with his father. So that was all I was intending to do initially. As I moved forward, I realized that that the letters were a great way and this is what I would say to parents, it's a great way to have dialogue with a child, but it's also a great way to investigate yourself. You can't write words to someone without reading what you wrote, and when you write, you can do so with a kind of patience and intentionality that you don't always do when you speak. So that gave me a chance to really think about what it was that I wanted to say to him, especially a small child who can look at your face and start trying to read your expression or pay attention to the intonation and try to determine what you're saying by how you sound and not hear the words at all. So writing was great in that regard. Writing, I would say also to parents, is a great tool because most of us, the only legacy that we'll leave, I know folks like to harp on things like generational wealth and that kind of stuff. That's great if you can do it, but the majority of people are not going to leave their children generational wealth. But what you might be able to do is leave wealth in words, wealth in wisdom. And so that's what I thought. Here's another opportunity. I don't know what I'm going to leave him financially, but I do know that if I don't leave him some words that help him at various points in time in his life, like I wish I'd had, when I had him and he was 30, I didn't have a relationship with my father. So I had no one to go talk to and say, "Hey, Dad, like, what do you do at this time?" As a husband, I had no idea. My parents were married 28 years. I've now been married 33. I don't have a reference point to say, "Well, what do you do at this particular time?" So I thought the letters served in that
Mhm.
way.
So, Nate, I feel as though our kids are about the same age, our marriage is about the same age, we're around the same age. Our generation had the mom as the primary person doing the day-to-day parenting, at
Mhm.
least in my household, and then
Mine
my
too.
dad would, like, swoop in towards the end of the day,
Yeah.
and he was very vested in my brother's sporting activities and things like that, but I feel like there was definitely a division of labor that I did not necessarily want to have in my marriage. I wanted it to be much more of a partnership and an equal, um, but having said that, I do feel there's sort of a reality to it all, and I call in my book, the give job, that something's gotta give when somebody gets sick or this thing changes or that thing changes, and that was my job. My job was most often the give job. It was the job that gave, and so I'm curious about, your marriage and your family and how you did that juggling and do you have any practical suggestions for it being a collaboration of effort?
As a husband, the most important and father, the most important job for me has always been him. So I'm a financial advisor. I've had a financial planning firm since 1997, but every client that I've had knows Naeem. And when I say they know him, he is sat in the living rooms with them. He's sat in an office environment with them. They all know him, and they all most of them have embraced him, have become uncle or aunt, grandma or whatever in his life. They've all understood that n- no matter what, I'm going to go and do what is best for him, which meant in many cases that I made a lot less money than some of my peers, but that didn't matter to me. What mattered to me was being for my child. What my dad was never for me. In relationship to my wife, I felt like what she wanted to do in her life. Um, when I met her, she didn't have a master's degree, but she wanted to get a master's degree. She got a master's degree. She wanted to get a PhD. She was a principal of a preparatory Jesuit preparatory school, so elite school here. She's been dean at the university. So her career, one would say, "Hey Nate, you started out here. You were this lawyer way up here, and your wife' educational background was here, and now she's here and she surpassed you." But that's been perfectly fine with me because I wanted her to have an opportunity, given her background, to go as high and do as much as she wanted to do. I just wanted to be present as a father and as a husband. So I'm probably a little bit different. I know I'm different than my peers here locally. I find myself maybe a little bit different than most men, not all men, but my biggest aspiration is just to find a way to be, as Mufasa said to Simba, that we're pals. That's been my biggest thing. How do I be my son's pal, and how do I afford my wife the opportunity and luxury to crack through the glass ceiling if that's what she wants to do?
Well, your collaboration is inspiring. So I appreciate the way you support your wife and your son. For moms, which is primarily who our audience is today, what do you want moms and a parenting listening today to know about being more intentional? And if there's one thing that you could suggest that they begin with this week, what would that be?
Well, I don't know so if we're so I would say sometimes I would say to moms, as a father, I would say sometimes, like, get out the way. Like, I know we pretend like we can't do stuff, like, that's the thing, and so let me unpack this a little bit, so it doesn't sound like I'm just, saying a bunch of word salad. But mothers primarily, as you described, are the primary caregivers for young men. But mothers oftentimes set young men up to be the kind of man that they would not want to marry.
Hmm. So,
S
yeah, definitely unpack
Right. Okay.
that.
Okay. So mothers call their sons boys, but they don't wanna be married to a boy. And when they're married to a man who acts like a boy, they're very unhappy about that.
Mhm.
So, to me, it begins with the way that we refer to young men. Because I said, as you mentioned, I said I'm raising a man in training. So mothers are also modeling for men. Is the right? We believe that men marry their mothers. Well, who do you want your son to marry? The person who cleans up his room, the person who doesn't require him to show any responsibility, the person who says let boys be boys, because that person grows up to be a man who's not responsible. So I would tell mothers, like, sometimes you have to get out the way and let a man be okay. Let it be okay if a man helps a young man become a man rather than having a young man be a boy. But,
So, no, I do believe that male role models, fathers,
mm,
and, ideally, but if that's not possible, another male role
another man,
model,
right, right,
right? Or several
right.
is really important. And, even during the development of our sons, there were
Mm,
times when my husband was not the best person to connect with them.
sure,
And when we would tag an uncle or
absolutely,
somebody else to
absolutely.
just to help. So I understand what you're saying about enabling, which is really what you're talking about, is that moms should not enable their son to grow into someone that they wouldn't appreciate
Yeah,
as a
yeah.
as a partner, right?
Hmm.
Um, and and I was pretty aware of that, not raising a man child as they're sort of called today, right?
Cool. Yep.
Um, and, I even called what I did sort of highly mediocre parenting. So, I sorta lowered the bar for myself to force them to become more independent.
Mm,
And
mhm,
so by the time they got out of our house and off into the world, they did know how to do all those fundamental life skills, right?
mhm,
So,
mhm,
but I think one of the things that many moms struggle with is how to encourage and inspire the the father to be more involved, and so that it's much more of a collaborative effort. Do you have any suggestions for that?
Yeah, I think, as we talked about earlier, and I said I'm not a motivational speaker, so I don't know how to get another person to be motivated. What I do say to fathers sometimes is that you do realize that one day this child that you don't show enough, that you're not invested enough in their life, may be the very person that you're asking to be invested in your life. And relationships at every level are just like those banks we always hear about. If you don't make any deposits, there is no return.
But I want to say that I think it's very tangible for moms to encourage something like what you've done here. And that maybe it's a little bit easier to put the wisdom down on a piece of paper than verbalizing it. Would you
Agreed.
agree?
I would, absolutely, absolutely. Again, because you're gonna get a chance to think through it. You're gonna get a chance to say, hopefully, without so much emotion, or maybe if you are emotionless, maybe you'll have some emotion in your writing. But I think what you'll want to say will be more like what you would hope it to be long term than what you might say in the short term.
Well, and Naeem's reaction to your words to want to publish it and share it with the rest of the world,
Yeah.
speaks for itself.
Yeah, he took the
Um,
words and put them on one of the letters is dreams lift us up, and sometimes pursuit of happiness, and he put it on the top of his cap and gown for undergraduate, and then he's used it to teach other students stuff. I was like, "Oh, he said, Dad, I have to teach, I'm teaching this class and I'm teaching them about dreaming. I'm like,
mm,
okay, all right, well, cool. You're using your dad's words, so
yeah,
that's pretty good.
that's awesome.
Yep.
So, Nate, I ask all of our guests at the end of the podcast to share a motto or a quote or something that somebody might say to themselves, in that nervous parenting time. Did you have one that you said to yourself?
I say it all the time now. I remind myself that the most important word in the human language for me is who. And I say it like this: you're not who you think you are. You're not who you believe others think you are. You're exactly who those you choose to be in a relationship know you as being. And so as a father, I'd say it to people this way. Susie says, who am I in terms of father? I say, I'm the greatest father in the history of the world. There are two fathers that might equal me. And the first one had a son named Jesus, and the second one had a son named Simba. And then they would say, well, whoa, Nate, that's pretty audacious. I said, yes. And so what does your son think? I said, my son thinks the same thing. Ask him. He thinks I'm the greatest father in the history of the world. And then you might ask my son who I was, and he might say, he's okay. And then the question then is, then who am I? And then I'm just okay. And I think that's an important distinction fathers should have. Fathers should ask their children routinely, or parents should ask their children routinely, who am I? Who do you see that I am? Because it is the child that gets to call the person mom or dad. It is not mom or dad that gets to call themselves mom or dad. So we should ask the people to who give us these reverential titles if we're living up to those words.
Right. Beautiful. So where should people and parents go for more information?
Yeah, we have a not-for-profit now called the League of Extraordinary Parents. So I would say that's probably the best place to go. The website is pretty simple. It's lxtrap.com, the League of Extraordinary Parents. And right now we're running an initiative on literacy, improving the reading levels. And we're doing some stuff here in Indiana because Indiana has a recent law that if a child can't read at the third grade level by the third grade, they cannot get promoted to the fourth grade. So that's where you can find me.
Love it. Love it. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
If this episode meant something to you, please follow and share the Mothers of Boys Survival Guide podcast on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Sharing helps other moms discover the show. Be kind to yourself, moms.